right, everyone. We really appreciate you for joining us here at Q Mixer's Mix at Tales Happy Hour. This is the third happy hour that we've done this year during Tales of the Cocktail 2021. Q Mixers is the official cocktail of Tales of the Cocktail this year and has teamed up with Tales to ask 8 industry leaders to offer their time in both one-on-ones as well as these fun happy hours to allow you to have a little bit of time to get to know them better, get to know their process of getting to where they are, as well as ask any questions in the latter half of this happy hour. So really, I'm gonna introduce our guests here in a moment, but I do have a little bit of notes before we get started. The first is, if you have any questions for either Lisa Wicker or Shannon Mustipher during this happy hour, please submit them to the Q&A section of the platform. We will get to all questions towards the end of the show. So the last half will be an Ask Me Anything, where I will fire off your questions to both Lisa and Shannon. We also are going to get a little background on the curated cocktails that both Lisa and Shannon made with Q Mixer's product for this initiative, which is called Meet at Tales. And you at home will get the chance to essentially win a giveaway of one of these cocktails if you post to Instagram and tag Q Mixers a picture of your attendance to this happy hour. So please be sure to do that. I'll remind you both to send your questions, also to submit for the Mix at Tales cocktail kits, which again, you'll either win Lisa or Shannon's cocktail kit. So I promised that I would introduce both Lisa and Shannon to you. Today we have Lisa Wicker, President and Head Distiller of Widow Jane Distillery. Thank you for joining us here today. Lisa, how are you doing?
Great, I'm so happy to be here. This looks like a lot of fun.
We're also happy to have you here with us. And as I've said, I'm just wonderfully admiring your back bar there. And we also have Shannon Mustipher here with us, cocktail consultant, spirits educator, and writer. Shannon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. This is super delightful, and it's wonderful to meet Lisa virtually, and hopefully we can do so in person soon.
Oh my gosh, so you guys have never met one another. This is the first time.
Believe it or not, but we're changing that one step at a time here, so.
Yeah, well, I'm happy that Q and Tales of the Cocktail Foundation have been able to bring you guys together. This is what Tales is all about. These organic, and I guess this was kind of a setup, but we kind of set you guys up, matchmakers we are. So very happy to see some of your first conversations with one another. I also really quickly want to introduce myself on behalf of Q Mixers and Tales of the Cocktail Foundation. My name is Daniela Jagaman. And I kind of want to kick off the show, if you guys are okay with it, and with jumping into these cocktails, because I know everybody at home should be getting a drink. I myself am just pouring myself a Q ginger beer to sip on during this show, but I hope that you guys are enjoying yourselves a little bit more. I have some more work to do today. But I would love, Lisa, if you could explain the cocktail that you curated with Q Mixers this year.
Yes, my blending cocktail should never happen. I'll blend whiskey all day, every day. And I am known even in my own family, who's very much into food and drink, don't let mom mix the cocktails, right? So when I went to Kyle McHugh, I'm like, you got to help me do something. And he's like, what do you mix for yourself? I'm like, ginger beer, and I'll do a ginger and whiskey, right? And so that's how this was born, because like, oh, I can make this. Okay.
Right? I love that you're also using both the ginger beer and the ginger ale in your whiskey ginger.
Yes, I am a fan of anything ginger, especially ginger ale. Yes, ginger beer. yeah, so this was when Kyle and I worked through this, it's like, yeah, this is perfect, yeah.
And you're using your applewood rye for this cocktail. I'm sure that all your whiskeys blend very nicely. And if you can't blend a cocktail, it's okay. We give you a pass because you blend beautiful spirits.
That's why people like Shannon, right?
Exactly.
That's that's how this relationship works, right? I'll bring the spirits, you do the mixing.
We got to work together.
We do.
Yeah.
We do. I've made a little rum. Yeah. Not here, but it's two other projects.
Yeah. And you guys are literally in the same place. You're both in Brooklyn, right?
I know. Yeah, because I think Crown Heights. Yeah, and we're in.
I'm in Crown Heights. We're like 20 minutes, 25 minutes away by car, I think, give or take.
Yeah.
Well, we look forward to any collaboration that might come from this. I would love to see any sort of rum collaboration that you guys do, or whiskey. I mean, Shannon, you're an expert on rum, but I know that you do all things.
Hint, hint.
Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Maybe next year we'll see it IRL. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for going through your cocktail. Do you have any other notes you want to pass along about this cocktail that you curated?
No, I don't.
Okay.
The fact that if somebody is cocktail challenged like I am, it's actually something that you can master. So
that's beautiful. We were just talking about the art of, a wonderful highball yesterday. I do want to mention that in these cocktail kits that Lisa and Shannon curated, Q Mixers included 2 highball glasses and an ice tray and a jigger. So you get the spirit, you get the product, the Q product, as well as those fun tools. Shannon, are you ready to chat through your cocktail with us today?
Yeah, the Antilles Ricky was actually born during the pandemic. I took a little bit of a hiatus from living in Brooklyn and went upstate, and it was kind of like about clearing my head. But at the same time, I wanted some simple things to sip on that didn't require me to have a full bar setup like I do at my apartment here in Brooklyn. And I'm a big fan of rum agricole. I think it's been slept on for quite some time, but I'm starting to see some positive changes in that regard. And it's just one of my favorite things to sip on, be it neat or in a more traditional way in a tea punch, which is essentially like an old fashioned without ice. So I'm also a big fan of gin and tonic, and had traveled to DC a few times prior to the pandemic sweeping through, and fell in love with their Ricky culture. So, I was just like, well, what's the best way for me to enjoy my rum agricole, but keep it light and fresh and super easy and relatable? And so the Antilles Ricky was born. There's a little known fact that there is a culture of drinking rum and tonic that the British Navy kind of indulged in a little bit with their naval rums and using the quinine and the bubbles to lengthen it. And I think that the vegetal notes of a rum agricole, which is a rum distilled from fresh pressed cane juice, as opposed to molasses, totally lends itself to going with the botanicals in tonic. So I started drinking it last year, and I think it's great, and it's super easy, and I think it's a fun way to introduce people who are less familiar with agricole to that subset of the rum category, or just to rum in general.
Well, thank you. I really look forward to tasting both of those cocktails. And I also cheers to both of you for curating those for us today.
Well, I'm about to taste mine right now. Hold enough.
Please do.
I'm going to build it really easy. Just 2 ounces of agricole. I'm going to pour it right over the rocks. I'm going to squeeze the lime right into the glass, because then you get some of the oils in there. And then I'm going to top it off with some Q.
Are you using ice, Shannon?
Yeah, there's ice in here. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna add a lime wheel and a little bit of mint. And it looks really summery and it feels summery here. I don't know about where you guys are, but it's in the upper 80s. So this is gonna hit the spot.
It's
Cheers.
warmer in, cheers. It's warmer in New York than it is in New Orleans right now.
Really? Oh, that's crazy.
We luckily got a little bit of a cold front. So it's 79 degrees here
Oh
today.
my gosh. Yeah. It's been quite the weather here. Yeah.
Yeah, I was in New York last week, so I can sympathize with how hot it was, or currently is. Well, I do appreciate you guys walking through those cocktails with us. They sound so refreshing. I really hope that somebody special, and I know somebody special, will get the last remaining one of each of your cocktail kits that you guys curated this year. So you guys at home, please, please, please. It's so simple. You just post to Instagram, either on your story or on your feed, and tag Q Mixers your attendance of this event. So I would love to get into a little bit more background on the two of you. Some people may be very familiar with who you are, but some people, this might be their first introduction to you. So Lisa, I know that you have had a journey to get to being the head distiller of Widow Jane. Can you kind of bring us on that journey?
Yeah, it's actually a long, very long, boring story. So I try every time I take a stab at it, I try to shorten it and try to make it a little more interesting. But yeah, I'm the mother of 3 grown children. I had exposure to the wine industry early on when I was in college and high school and college, and then realized you could actually make alcohol for a living, and then moved into working for the arts. I was a freelance writer for a long time, and then, trying to raise kids, right? And then had started a costume company for a professional dance company. We moved many times and ran that. I was costume mistress and founder of that for 6 years. And a friend asked me offhanded, she's like, she and another friend were working for a winery in Southern Indiana, and they're like, we need a farmhand. And an extra farmhand because we can't find anybody to cut grapes. I'm like, oh, I'm in. And they're like, you are? I'm like, yeah, I've actually done this in my past life, right? And so I did that for a season. I was costuming a nutcracker and being a farmhand at the same time, and knew that's what I was supposed to be doing. And so a man that had asked me many times to come to work for him at a small Indiana farm winery, he called me again and said, are you please come to work for me? And I finally said yes. And 3 days in, he's like, what did I finally say to get you to come to work for me? I'm like, you didn't really. It was just, that it just seemed right. In 3 days, like I said, in 3 days in, I knew that's what I was supposed to be doing all along. That was about 21 years ago. And so I was in winemaker for 10 years, patched my education together at University of California, Davis, Purdue University, a little bit at Virginia Tech, because I was, my family was still busy. When my youngest graduated from high school, I picked up and moved to Kentucky. I had an offer to build a winery with a really established vineyard there. Kentucky actually has a very old wine tradition that no one knows about that got wiped out with Prohibition. And so there was some effort at that point in time to try to bring that back. But I thought, if I go to Kentucky, I had the distilling bug. If I go to Kentucky, I can maybe get a still in the winery and start making some brandy. So I get to Kentucky, I would wiggle my way on the legislative committee so that I can get a still. And in the meantime, I meet Steve Beam of Limestone Branch, and he's building a distillery 6 miles down the road from where I was building a winery. And we got to be fast friends and we're each other's extra set of hands when we were establishing our businesses. And the owners of the winery went through a very spectacular divorce. It was quite something. And so I realized I was probably going to lose my job because they were probably going to sell the winery off, which they did. I booked a ticket to Sonoma, thought, well, I'll work a harvest there and come back to Kentucky and regroup and try to figure this all out. And Paul and Steve Beam took me to dinner 24 hours after I resigned the winery and hired me full-time for the distillery because I'd already been helping him in the evenings. So I got into distilling a lot faster. So I got to go to Sonoma and just drink rosé and not have to worry about finding a job, right? So.
Oh my goodness. I have to stop you really quickly and just tell you that I have been internally laughing and not trying to laugh during this entire story because there are so many moments that I wanted to be like, please tell me more about that. I don't think that story is boring at all. You were a costumer and you worked in the art world, and that I mean, everything seems like you happened to follow your passion to like get to the place that you had in the back of your mind at the same time.
Absolutely. So, when you get caught up in stupid young person stuff, and the reason I was exposed to the wine industry in high school and college is because, it was, a long-term boyfriend, right? And so I was so drawn to the industry. It's like, but I can't do that, after we break up, right? I can't do that. And I kept finding myself dabbling in it, right? Or interested in it. And so I came back around again. Organically, I just jumped on it, and like, that's truly what I was supposed to be doing all those years. So yeah, and then moved distilling faster than I thought I would, and it was baptism by fire. We were working 60 or 80-hour weeks at Limestone Branch in the beginning, and at the time, get on the back side of it, it's like, this is crazy. Not unlike all the bartenders here, right? We've all done it, right? And but you come out of that and you realize you've got 2 years of experience for every every year that you're working. So and I got fired from Limestone Branch because Luxco purchased them, and I was the number 2 man there. And so I moved on and into consulting and distilled briefly in South Carolina. Had an offer from a remarkable distillery, turned it down because Ted Huber Starlight in Southern Indiana had offered me a position there with lots of opportunity. And I'd known him for years from winemaking. They'd had a brandy distillery for 35 years and had added a grain whiskey distillery. And so I was there for a year and a half and thought I'd be there forever. And Drew Colesveen, I ran into him in Bardstown. He's like, Lisa, I've been meaning to call you. He's the master distiller for Willett. I've been meaning to call you. There's this project that somebody we know in the industry wants to build the first craft distillery in Nelson County, Kentucky. And so that's still my primary residence. I live here in Brooklyn 90% of the time, but I still own a home in Bardstown. And so I took that position and oversaw that construction of that, and then decided to go out on my own after a year. And Samson and Surrey, who owns Widow Jane, was my third client. And I was another couple build a distillery. I had some other client work, and they called me at first and said, we need somebody to move to New York. And I said, no. And then I walked back to my living room, and I have a half a bottle of Bren on the front of my whiskey cabinet. And I always organize everything, so the Bren's usually in a different place. And it's like, well, that's an omen. I just blew that, right? And my boss fortunately called me back 3 weeks later and said, Lisa, I'm going to fly to Bardstown. I'm going to take you to dinner. I really need to talk to you. And so I came on as a consultant for a year and a half. And then a year and a half in, he called me again and said, I'd like to name you president of Widow Jane and head distiller and head blender. And that's 3 years ago this month. So it's been a whirlwind. I've been working in Brooklyn now for 4.5 years. So.
Wow. That's quite the journey.
Yeah, crazy.
But it's a wonderful story. I really hope that you don't feel that it's boring ever again. You have quite a lot within all of those years, and I'm happy that everyone was so insistent on having you be at Widow Jane, because you have a beautiful product.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm very proud of what we're doing here. I've got the most amazing team. I put my team up against anybody in the industry. There's only 15 of us. We're small, but we're very mighty. And I have some remarkable personalities working here.
Oh, I do not doubt that. Shannon, you also have a background in the art world, don't you?
Yeah, for better or for worse. I studied.
Yes.
Oh man. Well, I studied painting and art history in undergrad, and I have a theory regarding the condition of everyone I went to school with, including myself. There are 3 types of people at my school: on medication, self-medicating, needed medication. But not to be disparaging about it, it's an amazing program. I went to RISD, and the biggest takeaway from that experience was that it was all about problem solving. And so the problem solving coupled with the work ethic and do whatever it takes to get it done, I think was very influential on me in my career, and various things that I've worked in subsequently before getting into spirits, it's like, oh, do I have to stay up for 24 or 48 hours to get this thing done? I don't recommend you do this at home. But, it was just kind of like drilled into me that you don't quit until you get the result. And, it's a very vigorous experience. And I'm really glad I went through that, because I learned early on that, like, if you want it, you have to work for it, and you have to work tirelessly and relentlessly, and you don't walk away until you get what you want.
Yeah.
So, that was my boot camp experience, but, mixed with a lot of fun, just met so many cool, creative personalities. I hate to use that word creative, it's so cliche, but, people with some really wild ideas that have gone on to do all kinds of amazing things, like the founder of Airbnb.
Oh, wow.
He went to RISD. We were RAs together. My theory is that he was studying industrial design and he was an RA, and like housing as a product was probably something that was inspired by the combination of those experiences. And, there's, numerous other stories, but I started off at RISD, and when I moved to New York a few years after graduating, I stuck around Providence for a bit because I was really attached to the city. It was really funky and grungy at the time. I'm going to date myself, but this is like in the early 2000s, where there's a rock club downtown that had a live python tank, and they would drop a mouse into the tank every night at midnight so you could witness the python feeding. Like, just to give you a sense, it's like, a lot of culture and stuff going on, but also a little grungy, kind of New Orleans-esque. A lot of people moved from Providence down to New Orleans after graduation. So that was a really formative experience, not just for the art school, but also for the culinary scene. So it was in my last years at RISD that I fell in love with cooking and hosting dinner parties, and as a result started getting into wine and making cocktails at home. And so that's kind of like where my kind of like first approaches towards hospitality were beginning to take root. I was working as a barista, became obsessed with like all the ways to make coffee. And I had like 10 different apparatus at home and different espresso machines. And I was like reading about it and baking biscotti, even though I don't eat bread or wheat. I was like, I just have to make the perfect coffee experience. So like,
I love the dedication there.
No, just way over the top. But, I think, studying in Providence in that environment kind of set me up to be inclined towards like a deep dive on anything that I would be working on. And when I was a barista, I totally took it that seriously, even though like, back then, I don't know that anybody was doing barista competitions. There's really no like outside validation. I was just like, I'm going to make this coffee good, damn it.
Yeah.
And I think that, became the later kind of setup for the work I would subsequently do behind the bar. So let's fast forward to 2006. I moved to Brooklyn and started working as a freelancer in the photo and production industry as a wardrobe stylist.
Was that what moved you? Was that job what moved you?
No, I want to come and, and show my work in galleries. But the more I saw what was going on in the art world or the art industry, I was just feeling a little skeptical, because you had people who were like under 40 getting MacArthur grants and retrospectives at the Whitney. And I was like, well, how much have you done? It just was starting to resemble mass entertainment. And I was like, oh, it just looks like you're going to be young and consumed and spat out. And I didn't want to be involved in something like that. So I tabled it, started working in production and did that for 5 years while also working in wine bars and then later in restaurants. After about 5 years, I realized that I didn't have the passion to work in wardrobe to keep doing it, but I really did enjoy hospitality, and the cocktail bug had been steadily itching. And, I was still making drinks at home and obsessing over vermouths and Manhattans. And so a restaurant that I was serving in at the time was adding a full liquor program to their restaurant. And so I wrote a menu, showed it to the boss. He laughed at me because obviously I wasn't qualified.
I like that you were
He was
just
like,
I'm gonna do this. Like, here you go.
he was like,
planned
haha. But I did end up getting a couple shifts, and as predicted, I was terrible, but I was just determined. I just was really in love with cocktail culture and wanted to be a part of it. So, I did that for a few years, cobbling together shifts at various bars in Brooklyn, and in 2015 became a bartender at Gladys before it had shifted over to a Caribbean concept. And again, did the same thing when I was there. I was like, you guys have a beverage director. The cocktail program seems to be a little bit adrift. And so I was like dropping specials every night, and then called a meeting with the owner to suggest that we try this program that I had planned out. And it was hysterical because his response was like, I'm so glad you called this meeting because I feel the same way. I want you to remake the bar. And I was like, oh, wow. He's like, I need a rum bar. And I was like, oh, I knew nothing about rum. I'd had maybe Smith and Cross and maybe two other things up until that point. So I had a month to taste something like 150, 175 samples, come up with a program. And that was what got me started on my path as a professional.
How do you
in
approach
industry.
that task though? You had a month to basically learn all things rum. How did you, outside of tasting it, really, how did you prepare for that?
I was there every day. I didn't take a day off. And my roommate at the time was teasing me because I'm really big in the charts. And so I had a big blank wall that was just filled with Post-it notes. And she was saying, you look like a serial killer. Because I was going through old cocktail books and charting out different rum cocktail recipes and creating a genealogy, try to understand, what were cocktails in the canon of rum mixology that seemed to be influential in terms of pushing it forward, or what had longevity or relevance to where we were at the time. I just literally just turned my phone off and was just there every day. That was it.
Wow. That's, it seems like you both have this through line in your lives where you just were okay, this is my brain and this is what I want. And things kind of didn't fall into your lap, but it was like you were manifesting it, if you will, welcoming it into your life. I'm not saying that you didn't work very hard, because both of you were I worked 80-hour weeks, or I worked 48 hours over the course of 2 days, which is all of the hours in both of those days. That dedication is really interesting. And
well, I have to attribute it to curiosity. It's I want to know, I want to understand, and I'm not going to step away until I feel like I understand sufficiently to feel satisfied.
Yeah.
That's what keeps me there.
I can certainly see that within your process, even the charting and researching to the extreme. I would love that. Do you have pictures of those charts?
I didn't think much of it. I didn't take any pictures. I'm sure I could recreate it as an art installation if I had to.
You should. But you should. Well, I think that oftentimes, in my own personal life, I'm I have the passion for this thing, but my brain does not process learn everything and create an art installation on your wall. So I appreciate that. Lisa, what was your process in learning when you're okay, I'm gonna start learning to distill?
I can relate to Shannon so much. I just want to say, okay, exactly the same thing. I've had people in the alcohol industry that I was working for directly tell me, it's Lisa, stop. I don't need this much detail. I'm I need this much detail.
Yeah. Also, how could you
right?
not know it?
Yeah. And just throwing yourself in, it's okay, where are the holes in my education? I used to think in winemaking when because I was a commercial winemaker for 10 years before I started being, moved into distilling. And I used to think if I can master these 5 things, I'm going to be a lot more comfortable, only to find out each one of those 5 things has its own 5 things. So it never shrinks down. It only expands. And, yeah, the educating yourself, I don't want to have like any sad stories or anything like that, but, it was, spending as much money as you were making on education. It's like, okay, this is a hole in my education. And, I know my family's heard this a time or two, but they didn't know at the time. It's like you rent a car and you sleep in it, right? Until you can afford the class or whatever you need to do, because there's just this drive, I don't know how to even describe it. It's like, I have to learn these things. I have to be able to know this piece. And so, whether it's research on your own or calling someone or, reading everything you can get your hands on. I've always said I'm grateful that I found this later in life, because my kids would have been neglected if I found it earlier in my life. The Child Protective Services be calling. These children are unattended. Yeah, so but it's what Shannon's talking about. It's just like, I didn't do the Post-it note thing. I wish I had, but the similar pieces. I was an index card person, right? And I still save a lot of those scraps of things, because you'd have an idea and you didn't have time to deal with it at the moment, but you write it down on a card and then you'd research the heck out of it, right? So to try to teach yourself, or have somebody try to teach you, or something would come across that I really didn't understand at all. It still happens to me, right? And it's like, what is this? I don't know what this is. I got to turn this stone over. And yeah, it's a drive that I think it's those of us like Shannon. I shouldn't speak for Shannon, but or myself. It's like, you just once you find what it is you're supposed to be doing, you take your gift and you work really hard with it. You don't just take your gift and sit still, you take your gift and it's, it's been given to you by the universe, right? For whatever reason. And, you're kind of obligated to honor that and see what you can do with it.
Yeah. Well, I think that also it's like really incredible, because you both were able to do all this, had the dedication, the curiosity, despite also being in like very male dominated worlds. I'm not sure if that like even factored into it, like if you had obstacles that like came to you from that, but I do have that observation, and I'm sure a lot of people at home, just knowing from the applications that you guys had for the Meet at Tails one-on-ones, a lot of people really wanted to speak to you on that point. And I would, if you guys are willing, I'd love to talk about that portion of your experience as well.
Shannon, you're up.
I didn't think that I didn't view the industry as being like, quote unquote, male dominated as something that was going to be detrimental to my work, because my work is very personal. And yes, I've certainly had encounters, situations. I don't think there are that many. So I'm just going to put in context where I could see that at play, kind of forced out of a job. That's happened at least once or twice. But there's always something that's going to be kind of against your odds. That's just inevitable in life. And so I didn't really get too hung up on it. I just, picked myself up and kept moving, because it's like, if it's not this, if it's not that, whatever. So I never took it too much to heart, or felt too concerned about being at a disadvantage. And, I have to give a lot of credit to my father, who, grew up in Charleston. I was born there, but, didn't grow up there. And, his parents are from a rural part of the state, where it was really easy to believe in that time, that context, that as an African American, that you are disadvantaged by default. And the reality in the day-to-day life there is that, yes, you were. But I never grew up with any of that rhetoric in my home. My dad owned businesses, and I got to observe him making his own schedule, doing his own business. And we were aware of history, and we were, educated on what took place. But I just never grew up with the sense that I was going to struggle because I was Black or because I was a woman.
And it seems like you're like able to recognize like what you're capable of. You're like, I'm gonna shoot my shot regardless. Like this is
it's like
where I'm going.
Well, it's like if you're not with it, fine. I'll see you later or maybe never. But I'm going. So like I have no problem being like, okay, bye.
Exactly. That's like a really amazing quality. I think that a lot of people spend so much time like worrying about like how people are going to perceive them or like whether or not they deserve things. And it's like, of course you do. Like if you are capable of getting there, of course you deserve it. Like go for it.
I probably benefit from thinking about how I was perceived. Maybe I can incorporate a little bit of that into what I do.
Yeah. Well, I do appreciate you sharing that with us because I think like you do need to, I think people do need to recognize that in themselves. I do want to remind all of you guys that are watching that if you have questions for Lisa individually, Shannon individually, or either of them, please feel free to drop them in the chat or in the Q&A, and we will get to those a little bit later in the show as well. I think that we've touched a little bit on like connection and how meeting people have impacted your lives. I would really love to chat about that a little bit more. You guys have finished your one-on-one meetings this year for Tales. Can I ask you how it went? If you're willing to chat about that.
Because I am technically challenged. I got 2 of the 6. I connected with 4 of the 6. I have a follow-up date with the other people that I haven't talked to, but the 2 conversations I had last night, one of them went almost an hour. The other one was a good half hour, and they were remarkable. I've told both of them now that they have my cell phone number. I said, even if it's a year from now, please text me and tell me where you're at and where you think you're going. And they had a lot of questions. Both of them knew in their heart and their gut already that they are doing okay. I think it's that outside influence of like, your friends and family who love you dearly going, what the heck are you thinking?
It's right? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
It's like, Mom, have you thought this through? And I'm like, no, I haven't, because if I think it through, I really, not to be flippant, but if I think it through, I really probably, it doesn't make any sense. I should be probably.
You talk yourself out of it. Yeah.
Out of it, right? Because it's not the responsible thing to do. I'm 61 years old, and and so there's this piece, that it's like, oh yeah, it's time, your financial planner's like, that I just got one, right? But, and they're like, you're behind. I'm thinking, I'm not behind from, it's like, and I still feel the pressure from these. It's like all of these artificial timelines are, this is what you're supposed to be doing at this age. This is what you're supposed to be doing at that age. Maybe you should get your career together before you have kids. Maybe you shouldn't. I had a person in here recently, and he found out I was the oldest person in the whole company or the whole Sampson and Surrey portfolio. And he said, oh, I want to make you feel better. And I'm like,
better.
And I'm like, you know what? I said, I feel fine. Thank you. I said, I'm very fortunate that my big life decisions that when I was younger, you had to think about a lot. Am I going to get married? Yeah, I did that. Am I going to have kids? Yeah. How many? I guess I'm going to have 3. Are they going to be juvenile delinquents? Are they going to contribute to society? Well, I got lucky. They're all contributing to society. Do they have great life partners? Yeah. So I have all those worries behind me, and I can really focus on my work, on the last 20 years, because I do get a one-track mind sometimes, right? So there's these pieces of like, but there's more positive than negative. We were talking earlier about the male-dominated world thing, and I had a young man that I was distilling with he said to me one day, he turned around, he goes, you're playing a young man's game. And I wish I thought, yeah. But
that's kind of bold.
It's really
every
bold.
comment, it's like, watch me, right? But for every comment like that, in fact, my boss at the time, he used to joke with me. He's like, what are other grandmothers doing right now? I'm like, I don't know, get the hell out of the way. I don't know. I don't know what you're supposed to be like. And so there's all these, what you're supposed to be doing, right? You're supposed to be doing this. You're supposed to have these things figured out or whatever. And I just think the best thing I saw today was the National Park Service put out their oldest park ranger is female, and she's 100 years old, and she didn't become a park ranger until she was in her 80s.
Wow.
And so this is my new hero, right? So trying to not stick to everybody else's timeline, and so I had those conversations last night, and they were so solid. It's like, don't let everybody else get in your head, because you'll do that for yourself, right? So do what's true to you, and stick with it, and be willing to trade stuff off. There's times it's like, gosh, I have the most amazing girlfriends, but they're in a different life place than I am. And it's like, gosh, that would be nice, and at the same time, like, oh my gosh, I'd be bored out of my freaking skull. So be true to yourself, dig deep. And like I said, take whatever gift you have and work really hard with it. Just because you have a gift doesn't mean that it's all going to be easy. It just means it's going to give your work some direction.
Well, I mean, that is excellent advice.
Sorry, I'm on my soapbox.
No, it's great. Preach. Love it. How about your one-on-ones? Did you enjoy the process, Shannon?
I mean, they were great. I had a couple technical glitches, but I was able to kind of rejigger some stuff and met all but one individual. But what I was really inspired by was like the various people at different stages of their career looking to do different things. Like there's a gentleman who is running a bar in New Hampshire, and he wants to learn how to be a consultant. And I've never coached anyone on how to be a consultant, but I was able to kind of recall some experiences I had that I think he's very capable of doing at his stage of development, and just encouraging him to be like, it's not that hard, but there's some practical things you can do to just give yourself the tools to be able to feel confident as a consultant. And there's someone else that's working on a packaged product. And again, packaged products are not my area of expertise, but I have done brand work and sales work. So I could talk to her about like, hey, here's some questions that you might want to ask yourself around who's more important for you to reach at this moment. Is the consumer? Is it the bartender? Obviously you want both, but who can get to faster and more efficiently? And when's going to be the right time to engage with various sectors and the benefits and pitfalls of both avenues, and just kind of think about that. And and all this to say that people come with some really sharp questions and coming with a lot of like ambition. And the fact that I was able to even help a little bit, I was like, oh wow, that's pretty cool, because I think sometimes we get into our own tunnel vision of the thing that we do, and don't necessarily recognize the lessons that we picked up along the way, whether we deliberately set out to do so or not. And so I would say that the experience is really cool, because everybody has a lot of value inside of them that they maybe don't recognize or engage in. And so doing some kind of mentorship, whether it's formal or informal, I think is very healthy for everyone. And I was reminded of that today.
Well, that's great to hear. I do have a Meet at Tails story that's involving your book as well. Or
Well, maybe kind of indirectly.
Yeah.
indirectly. So my Me to Tell story was from, oh man, I feel like since the pandemic, like the years are all kind of blended. And I'm
I
like, when was that?
I always think it's like 2025 by this
Well,
point.
that's to say, I don't know, but I want to say that I was there in 2019 and I wasn't seeking him out, but I had an opportunity to just kind of bump into Derek Brown. And Derek had just published a book with Rizzoli, who's also the publisher of my title. And I'd always like been aware of what he was doing at Columbia Room and hadn't been to DC at that point. Um, and I was like, hey, Derek, how are you? And I was like kind of fangirling a little bit. And I was like, hey, we have the same publisher and I'll be in DC in a few months and it'd just be great to connect. And what I learned in that moment is that a gentleman of his stature, you know, this is a gentleman who um, organized one of the first kind of cocktail history conferences, you know, outside of Tales. And it was at the Library of Congress and involved Dale DeGroff and, you know, numerous other figures. And he's really serious about not just the cocktail, but the education behind the cocktail. For those of you who've not been to Columbia Room, like they have a dedicated area that is a classroom and it's beautiful and well appointed. And it was just really inspiring to meet somebody that put that much time and energy into documenting the history of cocktails, as well as like making it like a living experience for people on a regular basis. In other words, nerd to nerd. You know what I mean? Like I was like, you're a cocktail nerd. I'm a cocktail nerd. Hi.
Also, for those of you who haven't been to Tales in person, you can find a lot of cocktail nerds there. I appreciate that you found somebody that you could really vibe with, though, and somebody that you admired. I mean, it seems like you wanted to bump into Derek Brown.
Well, yeah, I get it. I got to emphasize, like, yes, okay, I got to qualify it. Okay, cocktail nerd, cocktail documentarian, cocktail historian, right?
Uh-huh.
So it's one thing
Yeah.
to be nerded out about it. It's another thing to be a deep researcher of it and someone that also documents it and disseminates it. And, you know, I consider
You're
Derek
right.
to be like up there in that class of people that document and disseminate, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you are clearly that person as well.
I'm getting there.
I also like really could listen to you classify like every grouping of individuals. I loved your art school classifications. Now we have cocktail nerd classifications. Well, I appreciate you both sharing how these meetings went. I think that is one thing that I really miss about Tales being in person is that you really just bumped into people. Like you just turn and see somebody that you've been following or admiring for years. And the great thing about this Tales is that you can quite literally message that person and try to set up some time to speak. But there's something really magical about just running into somebody. And I look forward to doing that again sometime soon. I would like to open it up to a question that we got from Jacob Kramer and Kramer Jensen, excuse me. Jacob, I'm gonna read the question to Lisa and Shannon. They can't see it. So as somebody who tries to do everything the best, do you think it's something that you're born with? Can you learn to do everything the best?
Lisa, do you want to take this one first? Because I'm perfectionist, and I got to find the best way to answer this question.
Yeah. Do you notice my silence? So like, oh, Shannon's going to take this one first. Yeah. No, I think it's finding your path. I used to lay awake at night going, what am I supposed to do when I grow up? Right. And I was in my late 30s and early 40s, and at 39, I started working in wine. Right. And, but for years, it's like, because I take part-time jobs, I would be writing part-time, you know, my kid's dad, we moved a lot, he was in manufacturing, and you know, so I would willingly try new hats, you know, it's like, oh, I'm going to try this for a while, and I'm going to try this job, and it was okay, and I, you know, I think it was a conscientious employee, and but once I found this, it's just like, you know, I don't know that the drive there is to be the best. I think the drive is just there because it's so interesting. And I think, you know, I feel like one of the lucky ones that I was able to match up. I mean, I have worked for less than minimum wage. I have cried all the way home in my old pickup truck with no heat in it at 2 o'clock in the morning on a 9-degree night because I was soaked by a pump. I mean, it's not sexy. There is no romance in it. But at the same time, when I'm telling the stories later, there is a little romance in it, right? You know, I mean, it's been tough, hard work. And I don't regret any of it, you know, because I'm the lucky one that I was able to match up what my passion was with what, you know, and if I'd found it years earlier, I was joking about my kids, but craft distilling didn't exist, right? You know, I got lucky that I started with a craft distillery when there are 250 craft distilleries. There's 10 times that now. You know, there's over 2,000 DSPs out. And, you know, so I did, you know, it wasn't even invented yet, you know, so maybe that's why, you know, I would lay awake at night because, you know, it's the universe trying to tell me that you just got to be patient and hang in there. But yeah, it's not, you know, like I said, I don't know that ultimately like, I'm going to be the best, you know, blender, the best distiller. It's more about the fact that I love it so much.
But that's that drive to like learn more about it consistently is kind of an action to be the best, because you're not just creating a product and being like, this is what I do, and every day I'm going to wake up and do it the same way over and over again.
I don't think you can learn it all. You know, I think
you can't possibly.
Right. Yeah. So I guess you don't think you're the best at anything because, or at least personally, you know, because there's still too much for me to learn, you know.
Yeah, it's always a work in progress. What about you, Shannon? Are you born with it?
I wish.
I guess
I woke up like this, but that's not quite enough. So, you know, to answer that question, you know, the beginner's mind concept is a little cliche and gets thrown around, but I kind of perceive through everything that I'm doing, like, I'm not sure, like, not saying I don't have confidence. Obviously, I have prior experience to draw on, but there's always new information. There's always new products. There's always new opinions and new things going on in the environment that really kind of influence like the relevance of an idea from last week or last year or what have you. So again, you know, being like voracious for new information, that's a stimulating challenge for me to always be trying to figure new things out. Not everybody wants to do that, and that's fine. But in my case, that has been my avenue to being able to deliver my best work. But for some people, their best work could be the result of meticulous repetition of certain actions in the context of a craft. And depending on what that craft or that discipline happens to be, maybe there's really not a lot of novelty that needs to be factored in, because some crafts develop at different rates, and some of them don't really need innovation past a certain point. You know, Japanese tea preparation, not really much more to improve upon there, but what you can improve upon is your sensitivity to the materials, to the temperature of the water, and to the mood of the guests that you're serving, right? So it all depends on the medium and the environment you're working with and your temperament. But I've never thought I will be the best. I always thought I will do my best. Mm. And that's it. And when I don't do my best, instead of getting down on myself, which I used to do in the past, I ask myself, oh, well, what was behind that? Like what did I need, or what was I not getting, or do I need some support, or do I need some accountability so that I can just kind of focus on the solution, you know, instead of, you know, not being the best.
Yeah. Well, part of what you just like ended on is part of Jacob's follow-up question.
Oh,
Is this something that you can foster within your staff or the team that you work with? Is it something you can teach?
man, that's such a sticky one. And I just say it because, I was managing Gladys, and I love the team that manages the group that has other properties that live beyond Gladys. And they're always really good about finding a way to put people in positions that would allow them to kind of like be what they were good at and be supported in whatever that was. But how do I encourage a team member to be good? Okay, I would just say positive reinforcement. If I see you doing something and I see that you're excited and curious about something, then I'm going to like give you tools to get into that. Like, okay, whether it's a trip somewhere or an invitation to a seminar or a book or just something, like I can see that you're really into it, so I'll give you some tools. If I see you doing something that's going to be detrimental to you, I'll call you on it. I'm not going to shame you, but I'll just say, hey man, this is not helping you. And I'll just kind of let them draw their own conclusion around why that is. But then I think the key is to be observant, so, as a manager or an owner, yes, it's a business and you need to get certain results, but we're also dealing with people. And so understanding where somebody is at will help you to get those results, as opposed to just like being hard-fisted about, I need this, this, and that. And there's a list. I mean, you can do that for only so long, but you're not going to get the best out of people if you're not like recognizing and drawing the best out of them.
Yeah, I like that, being observant and also giving them space to find themselves within what you're trying to all achieve. Lisa, you kind of talked to this, like you say that the best work environment is like a buddy system.
Yeah. One of the things I've really started concentrating on here is kind of cross-training everyone. Not that everybody needs to be an expert at everyone else's job here, but even our bartenders have steel-toed boots so they can help out in the warehouse, right? And I just want people to have a healthy respect for the other person's position and what they have to do here. I think looking for clues. One of our distillers who's turned out to be incredibly talented. She was working in the office and doing retail. And when I first started here as a consultant, we had these conversations. She was always baking. She knew grain. She's talking about yeast. And I needed to expand the distilling team here. So rather than looking outside of what and I talked to her one day, I said, have you ever thought about distilling? And she's like, no. And I was like, but I can't teach the passion that you have for grain and baking and yeast. And let's give it a go. And it's instinctive for her, right? And so I think, it's what Shannon's talking about too, looking for people's, looking for their strengths and trying to play to those strengths, even if it's like, well, this isn't convenient for me because I really thought I needed you to do like this job, right? But your strengths are coming into here. So it's making it a little more complicated for me, but let's play to those strengths, right? And build a better team that way. And like I said, I would put my team up against anybody. I just have so much respect for everyone here. They're very passionate. I try to, as I go, teach whiskey culture education. I just got back from the Kentucky Bourbon Festival. I was trying to tell them, what I had tasted and who these people are and how this all fits together with what we're doing. So we're not just an island here, we understand the culture. And so it's continuous. You can't teach personality, you can't teach work ethic, but you sure as heck can teach the rest of it. So if you've got somebody that's a tremendous human being that works hard, the rest of it is all attainable.
Well, I appreciate you both really giving that insight. It seems like you guys need to meet IRL, have a conversation over a cocktail, and figure
Shannon
out a way.
has my email now, and she's seen this bar, so she needs to come. I know.
All right, exactly. I know where you are. I love it.
Yes.
Well, we are about to wrap up. Do you guys have anything else that you want to leave the industry, the attendees here that came and drank a cocktail with us today?
I'm going to jump on this. I just want to say thank you for the Tales experience, because, you know, it's like now I know Shannon, right? And here she is in the close enough to the neighborhood. And yeah, so it's nice to have in this weird time that we're in kind of an authentic Tales experience, and yeah, and meet somebody else that I respect in the industry.
Well,
Well,
thank you.
Lisa, likewise, it's been great to learn about your story and your journey, and also learn that you're really close by. It's
Yeah.
great. You know, what I would say to the attendees is that we got a lot of questions like, well, how do I do this? How do I do this? And I'm like, I don't know, you tell me. You know, so a little Yoda with it. It's like, well, it's all very personal. And yeah, there are certain guidelines. Be on time,
Yeah.
be a good communicator. But I mean, only you know you. And it's all about, you know, in my mind, just being true to what it is you have to say. So I was like, well, I don't really know if the industry wants what I have right now. And I said, maybe it doesn't. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't get started, because it might take you 3 to 5 years to be ready to deliver that thing that you feel like you want to give to the industry. Like when I look back on what I was doing initially with Gladys, they didn't want that back then. But I did it anyway because there wasn't, yes, business, you got to think about what people want. But there are some things where it's not about what other people want, it's what you want. And then you do it, and then it catches up to you, and then you're ready for it, and the world is ready as well. And so for those of you who are concerned about your marketability or your image or whatever, it's like, don't worry about that. Like, what do you really want to do? Do it, get really good at it, and then when the time is ready, they will be there and they'll love it.
Well, I appreciate all of that guidance. I mean, it's not innovation if everybody else is doing it. If they're ready for it, you're not innovating. But just saying. But cheers to you both. I really appreciate you guys. I hope that you have a lovely evening. Thank you all at home for joining us. And we hope to see you again soon.
All right.
Thank
Happy Tales. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.